We are here today to talk about meetings and innovation culture. The mural link that we'll be using is here in the chat. 90 minutes recorded, and feel free to show us your fine faces and say hello if you would like. But with that, given that we're 3 minutes in, Douglas, shall we go ahead and start to kick off this conversation?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So just so I'm clear, because I think we might have we're talking about maybe going over a few goals here in the opener and the arc. And so I've got the mural here that I can share, and I can put that up on a bigger screen. So let me just do that real quick so everyone can see that, so it's a little more legible. So here we are. All right, excellent. So I think I'm just excited because Elise and I have talked about this quite a bit, and this is going to be a shared conversation and activity based. So we'll have a little discussion over kind of each topic, and then you'll have a chance to dive in, think about it, integrate it, and then we'll have a little discussion from there. So this is really a focus on innovation culture and how we can apply these kinds of mindsets or thinking in everyday meetings. And I think that's where we get the real juice, because it's one thing to say, oh, we got to transform our culture, but if we can attack our everyday meetings, that's when we can start to see some real transformative effects almost immediately. I am the founder of Voltage Control. We refer to ourselves as a change agency. We used to call it a facilitation agency, which many of you might resonate with, but most of our customers were like, what's a facilitation agency? So we help bring change in organizations, and we mostly do that through facilitation. So we do some training. We help train people on these methods, and we actually run the methods as well. So excited to be here today to talk about some of this stuff. And I guess as an overarching arc, and I had to give a lot of credit to Elise. We started talking in this kind of 3-phase kind of approach evolved out of our conversation, and I really appreciated it. This idea that you have to invite innovation. What's the invitation? Even we can think about what's the micro and the macro version of invitation. Like, how are we inviting innovation in our organizations, and how are we inviting people into our sessions to be more innovative? Also our practice, everything needs to be practice informed. So what moves and changes and actions are going to inform us and propel us toward the right direction. And then also, how are we rewarding and incentivizing people to take action and to get the results that we're looking for. So those are the 3 areas we'll be focused on today, and then we'll do a simple closer. But you'll see here on the mural, we'll have a few stories. Elise and I are going to be kind of just chatting, talking back and forth about these 3 topics. And then after each one, you're going to take a moment to think about how you might integrate some of these thoughts into your work, and what it means for you at your company or at your consultancy. And then after some time thinking individually, we're going to put you into some smaller groups to then compare notes, and then we'll do a bigger debrief as a group. So we're basically going to follow that same pattern for each of these phases. So with that, I want to kick it back over to Elise in case I missed anything. And I just dove right into some stuff, so sorry if I treaded on any of your spots there, but excited to do this with you today, Elise.
Yeah, no problem. So go ahead and let's stop screen sharing for a second. Let's just anchor in. Douglas has given you a nice overview of our plan. We're going to tell some stories. We're going to play some things, and Douglas is going to share a better link that lets us all get into the mural. And while he's finding a better link to get us into his mural, let's just be here together and anchor in what we mean by innovation in the first place. So that's a big word, right? It's a big soupy word. It's like inclusion and freedom, and it means a lot of different things to everyone else. So my first question for all of you, and I would love your answers in the chat, is I just sent that directly to John Keith. What does it mean to have a culture of innovation? What does that mean? When you think of those words, culture of innovation, what comes to mind? New ideas? Great, go ahead and type those in the chat. And if you've got them going directly to me, go ahead.
Open to change, fail fast, new ideas, curiosity.
Right. The ability to experiment and fail. I love that.
I love this. Everyone has a seat at the table. I think inclusion and belonging is like a bedrock that we had to build everything else on. So that's great.
Yeah, there's some creativity aspect to it, right? Doing things in a different way, maybe. Freedom to fail. Yeah, nice, beautiful. So let's take a look when we're talking about innovation, right? All kinds of meetings of innovation. It's a big topic, all kinds of nuance. When you think about your environment, the teams you lead, the company where you work, the people you serve, which parts of your business are most in need of innovation?
This is a fascinating prompt because you could look at this from the lens of which is most in need just from a survival standpoint. Like, if we don't innovate in this area, like we might be innovating, but if we were to stop, if we don't, it's going to be very treacherous. Or it could be an area where we're currently not innovating and it kind of needs it.
Right. And then there's innovation possible in the work that you produce. And then there's innovation possible in the way in which you work. Yes,
someone mentioned structure hierarchy. It's one of my favorites. In fact, one of my favorite authors, Safi Bathkal, talks about, well, if culture eats strategy for breakfast, then structure eats culture for lunch. So your structure can totally get in the way. And some folks even argue that Kodak's problem was a structural problem.
Right on. Famous story about failing to innovate successfully to stay viable in a market. All right, excellent. And if you have more ideas on this, as you have already, feel free to communicate in the chat and keep things going, because we're going to start by telling several stories about companies that innovate at different levels. Especially after moving past the whole idea that you ought to be innovative. So it's fairly easy and fairly common for the CEO or the board to stand up and say, okay, we need to be innovative. We need to outcompete. We need to all of these things. And then have that be something that everybody else in the company is meant to figure out what it means. Good luck. Don't disappoint me. Innovate, please. So we'll be looking at folks who actually took that farther and then have found structural ways to make innovation a day-to-day reality. And I think we're going to start by looking at, so once you've got this call to innovate, how do you make the invitation to innovate very explicit and specific? And Douglas and I are each going to share a story. And on this one, Douglas, I think I'll go ahead and start with the story of the OMIC. And then he's going to talk about Davida. And we have pictures for this in the mural, but you don't need to see it because it's mostly just an out loud story. I'm also going to try and stick to time. So this is a good innovation challenge for me because I get kind of wound up with storytelling. So OMIC stands for the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center. And the way in which they are structured, so innovation is literally in their name. And they're here to innovate on how you manufacture things made out of metal, airplanes, tractors, big mechanical, high resiliency, high stress systems. So it's not the kind of thing where you're like, hey, let's try doing bolts a different way today, right? In the manufacturing world, consistency and proven methodologies are key, but yet they still need to change and change. So the way in which that industry supports innovation is they create innovation centers dedicated to that. So it's an explicit funding of a dedicated and isolated area. And at the OMIC, the membership bought into the Innovation Center is composed of multiple corporate members. So Boeing and John Deere and a bunch of other companies buy a membership. The universities who want to do research in these areas buy memberships, and other private parties buy memberships. And once a year, they do a survey of all of their members and they say, what are the top problems in manufacturing that we're facing? So the first part of the call to innovation, the invite to innovation, is literally asking everybody, where do we need some innovation? And with that ask in front of them, they then create a list. They work together and make sense of it, do some interviews, and they create a list of 10 projects every year that are coming from the industry itself. And they ask industry, what exactly is this problem? And what is the cost benefit? What's the value of solving it? Right? How much money is this worth to us? And with those 10 projects outlined, they send out an opportunity, an invite to the universities that say, hey, apply to become the researchers of choice on this project. And the University of Oregon and Oregon Tech and Santa Barbara and all of that, they put in competitive bids to see who gets the project, which is then funded out of membership dues. And they run those projects and innovate new ways of creating airplanes and all kinds of other interesting manufacturing processes. And with that, they have an explicit mechanism for soliciting areas of needed innovation, prioritizing those across a whole industry base, and then getting those funded and supported with academic and pragmatic research projects. One very, very, very concrete, explicit invite to innovation. So DaVita is completely different. Douglas, do you want to talk about that one? And I did it. That was less than 3.5 minutes.
You did it. That's awesome. So and to your point about the differences, I think that's really important. We wanted to highlight some very different stories so that as you're thinking about how you might apply some of these concepts, you'd have a spectrum or some different approaches to consider. And you may think of things that are even outside of these stories, which is totally fine, right? And I even thought of another one. So I'm gonna keep my story really short so I can sneak this other one in, because I just bumped into it yesterday and I think it's really cool because it came from someone who personally experienced it. In the case of DaVita, their invitation comes from the values that they share and that they live and the culture that's cultivated. Now, it's kind of the lines get a little blurred between the invitation and the practice here, but I think it's really interesting because the focus on creating a culture where people are allowed to feel safe to do these things and encouraged, that in itself is it's like an evergreen invitation. They're constantly invited to do these things and behave this way. And I think the value I love this example, because when you think about a dialysis center that's inside of strip malls all across America, this is not the kind of company that just comes to mind when you think of innovation, right? Yet the CEO,
Douglas, so DaVita does kidney dialysis.
That's right.
Is that right? There, so there's healthcare. Yeah,
that's right. So there are dialysis centers and strip malls across the country, and the CEO is known for like dressing up like a pirate at the company gatherings, and one of their core values is fun. And the point is, like, they're dealing with people at some of their most challenging times, and how can we be innovative in how we nurture and how we care for and create community for our patients. And so this notion of fun being a core value and how we have serious work to do, but let's have fun doing it. And I think that often we've lost sight of our ability to have fun and the courageousness that comes along with that, because we feel like we're unable to unable to behave that way because it's not professional. And so I think that sends a really strong signal, really strong invitation. The really quick example I wanted to share was from an innovation, I would say, toolkit that was developed by Adobe some years ago, called Adobe Kickbox. And it kind of has been dormant for a while, but I've heard someone is bringing it back to life. So stay tuned for that. But I was talking with someone yesterday who was involved with the program and got to go through it quite a few times while she was working at Adobe. And she told me that the first time she received one of the boxes was this really just amazing moment, because it had a credit card in it. And the credit card had $1,000 on it. And that was such a big signal from management that they believed in her and were giving her permission to go do, like, what an amazing invitation to innovate. Here's $1,000. It's on a card. You don't have to, the barriers to spending that money and doing that work have been lowered big time. So anyway, I just got reminded of that story yesterday and I loved it. So I wanted to share that out. And so with that, I think we want to just take a moment to look here, and I'm going to go ahead and summon everyone over who's in the mural. If you're not in the mural, we'd love for you to join. The link is in the chats. I'll refresh it here in a second, but we're going to just jump down here into this area below the invitation section. Thanks for sharing the link. It says, what invitations might you use? So this is you personally thinking, just anywhere in the space provided there, just start creating stickies. It doesn't even have to be your best idea. Don't worry about curating anything. No one's going to even know you wrote it. Just get those ideas out. Putting an idea down makes room for the next thing to come to surface. Once we sit here and do some personal brainstorming for a moment, we're going to create some breakout rooms so that you can share some of your thoughts in some small groups. But consider your current meetings and how you work. When can you invite more innovation from your team? What would you say? So think about those moments, those opportunities when you might invite more invitation, and how might you formulate it? How might you put it into words? So just considering that prompt. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, and in the examples that we shared, the kinds of meetings where people are definitely putting out the invitation are the broadcast, a call for innovation. This is specifically what we're after. The ideation sessions. Here are all of our ideas about ways in which we can innovate. Sense making. Given all of the ideas that we have, which ones are the best priority? Which ones have the highest value to our industry? Planning. We are inviting you to innovate. What's our best plan for actually making progress soon? And then introductions, right? Those introductions and interviews. Who's the best partner for us as we innovate? All kinds of ways in which innovation becomes part of what your daily conversations might be. Let's play a 2-minute thought piece, if that's okay, and then we will send you off to discuss some of the ideas that you've come up with. Okay. That's enough gentle chilling. Don't you want to go talk to some people? So in your breakout, you'll have 6 minutes to compare your ideas and your answers. The prompt is in the chat. It's also in the mural board. And we look forward to hearing your ideas about how you might invite more innovation from your teams. We'll see you in a few minutes.
What I do to support other individuals and teams and organizations in their thinking and decision making, and that is focusing in part on creating those environments, or what I refer to as equitable environments, where people can just show up as themselves, and in that space of innovating or innovation, draw on their perspectives, unique perspectives and ideas as an extension of their experiences, and that when doing so, that's valued in an organization. So it's like there's no need of bringing people together for the purpose of innovation if we're not going to actually value what is uniquely presented by individuals. You know, it's great to have folks in the room, but if nothing comes of that because we're only interested in one way of thinking, then that really kind of puts a death knell to the whole idea of innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Whole bringing everybody into the room absolutely helps. Who had something that got into a really specific practice or way of phrasing that innovation that made that possible? Who got deep and specific and tactical with this one?
So I can share one thing that kind of touches on that when I think about inviting somebody to innovate, I think a lot about giving them permission to innovate. So I found that it can be really helpful to kind of approach that immediately and just say very explicitly call out, we're not worried about this, we're not worried about that. I want ideas, and kind of building that energy in the room and allowing people to kind of distance themselves from what they might, the restraints they might normally encounter or think about or put in front of themselves.
Nice. Permission is huge, right? And Douglas, I know you do this in your workshops, and we do a fair amount of it. It's the idea, not the person. Go ahead.
I was just going to say my favorite agreement is that we're going to be hard on ideas, soft on people.
I'd love to hear from one more person. What was something that came up in your conversation? Barb or B. Greenberg, is that a raised hand, or is that just appreciation?
No, that's a raised hand. One of the things that I mentioned that I do in meetings is allow people to present their best idea and their worst idea, but without identifying which is which. So that the two ideas just come out, and then everybody can just start reacting to those ideas, not knowing, because sometimes somebody's worst idea or the idea that they don't think works is really the right choice.
You know, you've just reminded me that I've used something like that, where we have people working in smallish groups to generate as many ideas as they can about whatever, the brainstorming idea. And then they pick the most, but they're all working on the same context. And then the group is asked to pick the worst, most unviable idea that they have on their list and give it to another group. And they receive one from another group. And then each group works on turning that into something that actually could be, game changing.
Very cool. Very cool. So a good start on thinking about, and take this further in your own context, right? So we're working together collectively here, but how do you invite innovation? And then once you've invited it, it's one thing to say, hey, I want your worst ideas and your best ideas, and let's look at them all. But then you've got to actually do it, practice, right? Day after day, it's a process. So for that, let's move on to our next set of stories. Douglas, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let's talk. One of my favorites is IBM. And at IBM, they have an innovation group that sits right in the middle of R&D and product. And, usually when I hear people having an innovation group, I get a little bit, my spidey senses going off, like the hair on the back of my neck's raising up, and I'm like, okay, is this the hipster barista where they got the cool furniture and there's this investment that they're making in the furniture, but they're not really investing in any real development of getting this stuff out the door. And meanwhile, the rest of the company is looking at this like going, hey, they got the cool snacks and they got the awesome WeWork furniture, and so they're jealous, and it creates such a weird dynamic. But this group is different. This group's mission is to literally start to develop a point of view around what's coming out of R&D. So you got these mathematicians and folks like cranking out patents that are like looking way in the future, like quantum computing and all these things. And this group is saying, all right, can we make sense of what these crazy brainiacs are doing? And then can we package that up in a way that product can understand it? So they're almost like a liaison between product and R&D. And I thought, I've always thought that's a really interesting practice and serves that company really well. I'm not saying that works for every company, but definitely, like when I think about IBM and how they're structured and what they do, it makes a ton of sense to kind of structure things that way, to kind of just kind of go in and watch and learn what these experimenters and scientists are doing, harvest it up, package it, and then set it up for success so that product can run with it. So I just always really big fan of how they structured it, and not typical, not what you see through these kind of stage gate kind of groups and whatnot. And so I think it's an interesting story to consider.
Cool. So I'm going to tell a completely different story. And this is a story about Anderson Construction. It's a large construction firm based here in the Northwest. I put in a link in the chat to their culture page. And it lists at the very top, here's our vision. Our vision is we're the builder of choice. And then they have their value statements, right? So this company is managed in a way that we call vision values leadership. This is our vision. This is where we're all heading. And here are the values. And the values are like guardrails. So in your pursuit of that vision, that when you make choices, make sure that they fit within the boundaries of these values. And a lot of companies will say things like that, just very much like companies will say, hey, they're innovative. But what makes Anderson kind of different is that they build, grocery stores and shopping towers and sort of large scale commercial real estate. And they had, like many companies in the construction industry, a number of projects that ran to a standstill. Because a construction project like that has got the owners of the land and the people who want the building to be leased. It's got multiple vendors involved. It's got all kinds of state regulation. You've got lots of banks in play, and everybody's working to mitigate risk and protect their interests. And the projects would come to a screeching halt. So at one point they had this building, they were trying to build it, and they're like, we have to find a better way to do this. And we realized the way our contracts are structured, we're finding ourselves being in competition, in adversarial relationships with all of these people we're meant to be working with. So they adopted what's called integrated project delivery. It's a construction-based way of structuring your contracts where you begin by getting everybody in the room and creating a strong communication agreement. Now, communication agreement says, here's how we share challenges, here's how we will know what's going on in terms of progress, and here's how we will score our ability to do that. We get basically a net promoter score, a rating for every piece of that communication agreement. And the first couple of times they did this, they hired an outside facilitator to come in and run these workshops with all their stakeholders, and it took them 3 days. Right? So massive, big scale workshops, at the end of which they ended up with an agreement that made their projects succeed. So they rescued the project that was otherwise failing. But oh my gosh, so much overhead, right? 3 days of communication agreements. So over time, they empowered everyone in their team. They're like, this is how we operate, make it better. So now, several years later, they are able to come together on a new project and create these communication agreements over a lunch. 1 hour at a lunch, and they have this agreement. Now, the agreement that you make during that lunch is not the only part of how they innovate, how they make sure they continue to work. So they have a cadence with every one of their projects where their team members, and this is everybody at every level, come into the room and they say, here's the agreement we have, here's the scorecard. Everybody go ahead and say, how did we do on being clear? How did we do on hitting our deadlines? Did we do what we said? Were there surprises? And anything that doesn't get a high rating, they talk about and they fix. And sometimes they have to fix them because When you are in conversation, honest conversation with your client on a construction project, you will learn that that really is their only budget. There is no budget headway, and you need to make different choices. Or you will learn that this guy's career is on the line right now. So that carpet choice that he wanted is going in, right? Whatever those things are, like some of those conversations that you couldn't have otherwise happen because you're in the room solving those problems together. To make that work, Anderson sends everybody who joins them at every level of their construction company through a full week of onboarding in their vision, in their values, in the way that they communicate. And they are quick to let people go who are not interested in serving and being committed to the quality of the product and being the builder of choice for clients. So in practice, a number of strong meetings going on here. They meet to clarify how they'll work together. They meet regularly to review their progress and fix it. And they train, they onboard, and they let go people who are not willing to innovate in these ways. A couple of pretty radically different examples there. We're going to do the same thing and invite you to spend a couple of minutes thinking about, on a day-to-day basis, how would you train? How would you communicate? How would you constantly check back and iterate on the innovation happening within your company? Douglas, do you want to just kind of elaborate on those prompts for a second for us? And then we'll get people back into the mural and give you some seconds to think about this.
Yeah, sure. So, the high level prompt being, what ways can you shift practices? And what we mean by that is, how could you adjust your meeting practices to embed more innovation? So thinking about either how maybe teams are structured, or how you are, the expectations you have of folks when they come to sessions, or how you use your time during meetings, inside the meetings. Lots of different moves you can make there, but just wanted to invite you to think about ways that you might be able to just adjust or adapt or just change your meeting practices to embed more innovation. And really important to think about, what's that first step? It's really nice to have these big, bold goals, but what's that first step that might get you there? So think about that a little bit on your own, and then we'll have some group work momentarily.
I'm going to play some definitely less chill music for you. Okay. Hopefully you've had a chance to come up with some ideas. How might you shift practice in your organization? Again, 6 minutes to work in a small group of new friends and compare your ideas. So prompt is in the chat, and we'll see you all again in 6 minutes. For those of you who did have an interesting discussion, what did you learn? What came out as some of the ways in which you might build innovation into your culture?
And I just wanted to say to Lisa, because we had very short notice about time running out, and one of our group members who's calling in from Hong Kong or Taiwan or somewhere in Asia where it's middle of the night, was starting, and we didn't even get to hear from her. So I'm still really curious to know what she was going to share. Their name is Alex.
Alex, did you want to share?
I thank you for inviting me to share. For some of the culture in a company has a long history and really like a family base instead of like a multicultural company. So the family somehow, the second generation or the third generation, they still want to run in the old fashion. Like in my company I work there is no HR department. Could you believe till now? But they still function. The way they try to change. Some of them have voices how we can change the HR function in the company, but still does not have, because they are content. They are happy with what have been done and not aware other part of the world in the same industry or outside this industry has changed a lot in the HR management in a company. So they is thinking how to be innovative and persuade someone who have been in a company long enough but not willing to change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really challenging, isn't it? Because in practice, the premise, of course, of innovation is that you're interested in it, that you understand the real scary threat that you lose relevance in the market or lose your ability to retain employees or attract employees or customers because you haven't innovated. So for those who are looking to increase their innovation practice, what are some other things that came up for you in that conversation? Yeah, John.
A couple things. One thing that Colin shared I really enjoyed was this practice. He was talking about a lengthy kind of generativity session where his group was being moved from room to room to room for different topics, just to change up the space, change up the people, change up the environment, which I like. So I think a lot of it is like we can explicitly ask people to be innovative, but I know from doing creative work in the past, like a lot of it's just about my state of mind, my emotional state. It doesn't have to do with the question I'm being asked, the problem to solve, or motivation. It's just like, what are the ways we can stimulate people to just feel kind of loose and free? And I thought that was one really good one. Another one that came up was really breaking down hierarchies. And so one of the ideas is like, if you're the person people look up to, take yourself down a notch. Be kind of a buffoon, ham it up a little bit, and just like make mistakes in front of people so that you're modeling it's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to look perfect or sit up straight in front of me. Just get loose. Let's have some fun and think of some ideas.
You know, I really love this notion of freedom, and it's something I talk about a lot because I see this trend with the the rate of change and just how everyone's expected to innovate and expected to just keep up and do more, and so everyone's just so busy, and they're doing so many things, and it's really hard to innovate when you're so busy. And like my favorite think about this, where does everyone, what's the classic story of where ideas come from, where people have their best ideas?
Shower.
Yes. And what's happening in the shower? What are you doing in the shower? Nothing. I mean, you're like cleaning yourself, but you're not multitasking, not doing a bunch of things. It's your moment of quiet. It's your moment of bliss. And so if we can create more space, I love activities and opportunities where we maybe exercise our ability to create space. When can we remove stuff from our to-do list so that we can make space for innovation to rush in? One of my favorite tactics is making a no list. If we know what we're going to say no to, then maybe we can protect things and maybe create more room. So anyway, John, thanks for that. It's something it gets me really excited.
Well, the other place where innovation practice has been really valuable, that invited serendipity, right? And one of the reasons that Anderson does their events the way they do them over lunch and whatnot is both the combination of shifting the space, but also multi-sensory input, getting our bodies, our minds, our senses involved, which of course, here at the top of the hour, we have one more section to go through. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get our bodies and our minds involved. And Douglas is going to lead us into stretch break.
Let's do it. Boom. All right. Ideally, do this standing up. What we're going to do is called stretch and share. It's a really fun one, really easy to do virtually. And what we're going to do is I'm going to share a stretch. I'm going to call someone's name. You're going to then you'll share a stretch. You'll call someone else's name. We'll do maybe 5 or so different stretches, and then we'll all be pretty loose. Okay. So the one I love, it's really easy. You just put your hands in your elbows and then press your elbows out in your palms. It's a really nice back stretch. It should stretch your upper back. It's really awesome. All right, Amber's PC. We would love a stretch from the PC of Amber.
I don't know why I named it that at the time.
Love it.
This is one that I do, and it took me a while to get it going, but touch your shoulder or touch your hands, clasp your hands into that.
I am not that flexible.
Yeah,
but I'll pretend.
I wasn't at first.
Still good.
I practiced. And then the opposite.
Nice.
So I'm gonna call on John, but I don't see a last name.
That's me, John. John, no last name, not John Keith. Great. What I like, especially all the desk and typing time I get, is just lace your fingers together.
Oh yeah.
Push them as far from your chest as you possibly can to kind of stretch out your hands and your wrists.
Nice.
Feels good. Let's see what Oliver has to say.
So I don't know if this is considered a stretch, but I like to
Oh yeah.
I like to do this one, and sometimes holding the other hand with something like a weight or something. And then this way as well. But even without the weight, it's just nice to get that stretch going on, work the back, the neck, or what have you. Yeah.
All right, one more. Oliver, you want to pick our last?
Sure. I'm
person?
gonna pass it on to John Skelp.
The turning the head to the
Oh
side
yeah.
to and then to the other side, just to give it a little bit of range there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
So good. All right, that's a really fun one. Really simple. Elise, you
Love
want to kick us into our next phase?
Yeah, so you have, if you're creating a culture of innovation, you've said, hey, we're going to innovate. You've made an explicit invitation to open the door to innovation. I don't know if you guys could hear my doorbell ringing. And you have created practices that make that innovation something that's repeated, reviewed, and done every day. So that's all great. But then the last bit of creating a culture of innovation is making sure that when innovation succeeds, it's rewarded. It's supported and it's rewarded. So we want to tell two radically different stories about ways in which you can reward and support innovation as represented by the pictures in the mural. So the first is Pixar. Pixar, as I hope many of you know, is a famous movie company that makes consistently award-winning animated movies. And one of the things that they do to help create and ensure that their stories that they tell are authentic and compelling is they have a group called the Brain Trust. The Brain Trust is composed of people who can absolutely have a deep understanding of storytelling, may have been through the storytelling process, have been through the storytelling process themselves before, and are completely ready to get candid and clear on the feedback for a piece of work in progress. So as they're working through a new story, let's say they're working on Toy Story 3, the team in charge of writing and directing that story will take and work through a scene, and then they'll bring it to the Brain Trust. The Brain Trust is this group of people, and they'll just say, hey, here's what we're doing. And the Brain Trust will ask all kinds of pointed questions. What are you thinking here? What about this? This isn't feeling right to me. And they're explicitly candid and very, very specific about what is going wrong or what doesn't feel right in the work. Not about the workers, but the work. So this practice, they bring it here, and the Brain Trust job is to point out all the problems and then lay out a whole bunch of ideas of possible solutions. But the Brain Trust has no authority. The team in charge of the story is still responsible for making those decisions. They get to pick what they do next. But every time they're coming up to a new part of the story, they'll bring it in front of the Brain Trust. Now, how does this have to do with reward and support? Well, getting to be on the Brain Trust is a huge deal. There's an enormous amount of prestige. There's enormous amount of responsibility. There's enormous amount of reputational benefit to being somebody who is seen as smart, brilliant, candid, straight up, willing to help make the best possible stories on the planet, to the point that even though there's no particular financial change, no awards, nothing like that, the members of Pixar's Brain Trust are listed out on fandom wikis. These are the people who get to be on the Brain Trust now. Being able to add fabulous insights that make things ever better is a huge part of what makes it compelling to work at Pixar. And Pixar's one example. If you've read Jim Collins' Good to Great, they do a similar thing in companies that are going through that innovation flywheel. They call it the council, the strategic council. And Intel under Andy Grove had a very similar practice where they would come into a room and they would ask smart people, if you didn't work here already and you were to walk in outside, what would you do? Which is how Intel got out of memory and got into chips in their heyday, because they were able to go into places and be candid and celebrate that. So that's one way you can reward and support, is by creating supportive environments and inviting candor. Douglas, give us a very different example.
Yes, absolutely. And to piggyback on your story, I dropped in a photo of the cover of the book Creativity Incorporated, which is Ed Catmull's book. And it's got a lot of stories about Pixar, including the Brain Trust. And it's an amazing read. So highly recommend it. So I wanted to talk about NASA, and specifically, I wanted to tell you about my friend Steve Radar. And he is the Deputy Director of the Center for Excellence for Collaborative Innovation at NASA, which is like one of the coolest titles ever. Like I'm I'm totally jealous of this awesome title. And the work that he does is about creating challenges and prizes for big unsolved questions and needs from NASA. And this could be from anything that you could imagine that they might need. They will create challenges, and these are reward mechanisms for whoever comes with the best idea. So it's similar to things you might see at hackathons or like startup accelerators, et cetera, except this is like NASA promoting these things, and they're on data science platforms. There's lots of these platforms out there that he uses, and they'll even launch some of their own challenges. And the big idea is that let's see who comes up with the best idea, and then often he'll find that there's interesting, like when he looks at the proposals, he'll see that two of the proposals are taking a slightly different approach. They're kind of complementary in some interesting way. So he'll actually award the prize twice and then put them together to collaborate on a solution that they never would have come up on their own. And so just for him being able to kind of bridge those gaps is pretty interesting. Also, the interesting thing about prize challenges too, especially the way he runs them, is he's specifically looking at presenting the challenges and the rewards, prizes to industries that are outside of the challenge that they're trying to solve. Because typically, I think Innovate did a survey, and they found that like it was something like somewhere between 70 and 80% of all innovations already exist. They just existed in a different industry. And so if you really, here's an awesome innovation hack. You really want to start using blockchain, then start looking at every other industries. How are they using it, right? Like, if you're in agriculture, don't just look at how people are using it in agriculture. Go look at how people are using it in other places, because that's going to really tell you interesting new ways to adapt. So the story there that Steve told me once is like really incredible. So they were doing this, you know, he and some of his like prize challenge buddies, they, you know, there's a whole community around the gig economy and kind of, you know, crowdsourcing, shared work pools and whatnot. And he was telling me one of this classic story of there's a potato chip manufacturer that was trying to make a more low-fat chip. And they were like, how do we get the oil out of this chip? And so they actually put out a challenge, like, who can help us solve this problem, right? And, you know, lots of like chemists and scientists and, you know, people in the potato industry or potato chip industry, the food industry, et cetera, were like putting forth a lot of great ideas. But the person that came up with the winning solution was a violin player. So this violin player said, why don't we resonate the chip at the frequency, at the resonant frequency of the oil? And when they did that, the oil just like leaps off the chip, right? And so that's what they did. And that's how they created their oil-free chip. So anyway, these challenges can be quite interesting ways to not only reward innovation, but find innovation in unlikely places. So you give people incentives to think about problems that they wouldn't naturally think about, but their talents can be put to use in ways that they don't usually put them to use in. So let's now take a look at our next prompt. Elise, you want to walk us through that prompt?
Yeah, so the question here, so we've talked about two radically different ways to reward and support. One, you support through culture and reputation and recognition. Another one where you support with, hey, you win a prize and you get some money, right? Some explicit, honest to goodness rewards. Very, very clear. So given the work that you do, how are ways that you might incentivize and reward innovation on your team? And what might that look like specifically in a meeting? So these two approaches are not mutually exclusive. I'll leave you with that thought. And again, we're going to go ahead and give you just 2 minutes. I have some progressively funky music for you to enjoy 2 minutes of thinking about this before you go into groups to share. All right. I hope you all got up some great ideas about how you might reward and incentivize innovation in your teams and cultures. Once again, we're going to send you to compare ideas, larger groups this time. So hopefully there are people in your group that want to talk to you about your cool ideas. And you'll have 6 minutes. And then we love to hear what you came up with before we wrap things up today. Have fun. All right, everybody, welcome back. So in that very last round, what did you discover? What were some of your great ideas about rewarding and supporting innovation? Oh, Oliver's eager to go. What have you got?
Well, actually, it was we were in the middle of a conversation, and Leanne from Canada was talking about, and Zaid in Jordan they were sharing from a healthcare perspective and the importance of innovation. And Leanne was just talking about reference that there's a challenge when administrators, and these are my words, don't value the perspective and ideas of practitioners, of clinicians, or what have you. And I thought my thinking was, wow, I would think that naturally the two, as well as others, would come together as you look to address problems or to innovate. And so my question to Leanne was to find out why she believes that those silos are so rigid, rather than naturally coming together. Is it structural? Is it cultural? I mean, what explains that? And maybe that's a question put in the parking lot. But it was really
it does. That does sound super fascinating, and also definitely not actually the question. So I'm wondering if we could make some space for that afterwards. So we will definitely stick around. So if you guys want to dig into that, but actually, while we're on that topic, Leanne and Zaid, do either of you have examples of reward and support in the healthcare space that you've seen that work, or that you think might be good ideas for bringing innovation in that space?
I don't know if Zaid wants to speak, but I will just say in healthcare, and I came into this this webinar not knowing what to expect, and I wondered if it was beyond healthcare and in many other industries, which obviously many other industries are covered here and represented here. Within healthcare, there is not a lot of opportunity for financial incentive. So really, incentives are in terms of acknowledgement for innovation and contribution to innovation. And that is a challenge, and it's part of why I'm here to learn from others, truly, because we are challenged, because you don't have that, lottery or the, oh, I can give you an extra bonus, or it's really in healthcare in Canada, which is a one-payer system. That we do not have extra dollars. So it's really the acknowledgement and the fulfillment of the person and the team members who are involved, so that they feel a fulfillment that contributes to what they do within your team, and elevates them within what they do to a level that makes them satisfied with their involvement. And that's maybe ethereal, and that's maybe only a healthcare scenario. I may be different in multiple other sectors, but without the potential for us giving monetary incentives, which we struggle with because a lot of people look for a bit of an additional monetary incentive. I think it's really the challenge to find meaningful incentives that will continue to engage people, to continue with moving the team forward along the road that will innovate and allow them for continued success. But I'm really,
I think Leanne, you've got there are a couple links there in the chat, and I think there are some great examples for you in the places of reputational support and reward. And just to harken back to the Pixar story, one of Pixar's inspirations for creating the Brain Trust was in fact from healthcare. It was in fact for multidisciplinary practitioners coming together to solve hard cases in hard to diagnose cases and things like that. And they said, aha, if we see our movies as patients, if we see our movies as our system, and we all are here as experts in our field to make this the best possible thing, like they should in healthcare, how might we make it even better? So that hopefully there, and then Douglas put in a note about Amy Edmondson's work on fearless organizations, which was primarily based in healthcare organizations. So they're really great examples there. We are getting really close to the end of time. I would love to hear one fun, specific idea about reward from one other person.
I was talking about in our section that we have this giant unicorn stuffed animal for some reason. Don't even ask me why. But maybe the innovative person gets to put that in their office, and it moves from person to person.
Yes, I love it.
Awesome.
Does it have a name?
Simple.
I don't think so.
Okay.
We have a mascot, and it's an octopus, but we named him Octavius. And if you reach a certain level with your rewards, then you get a golden Octavius.
That sounds super cool.
It's actually a ring holder, but they don't know that.
That's great. That's great. Simple things, right? And on the support side, the training side. So this is an opportunity to train back. So as you take back some of the things you talked about today in the chat, or quick shout outs, one sentence or more, what is one thing from this sentence that sparked an idea for you, or that you would want to have people who weren't here today listen for? Douglas put in psychological safety. Yeah, and it doesn't mean safety. Psychological safety is not safety from challenge, not safety from fear. It's safety that if you make a mistake or you say something, you won't be kicked out of the group. It's the safety to be candid, right? So innovation group. Yeah, what a great idea, right? Aligning incentives with the culture. Love that.
Incentives, aligning incentives to values can be really powerful too. And it, like, what does that person value? How can we celebrate that if they do amazing stuff?
And I love the person who noted that, move your meetings around, right? Like there are a whole bunch of different formats we talked about here: action reviews, the brain trust, the call to actions, the broadcasts, the celebrations, all of those things. Every one of those is an opportunity to talk about innovation. I don't think you can have your team meet in the shower, but maybe you can have them all take a shower and then come to a meeting with whatever came up. Wouldn't that be fascinating? Pre-work, long hot shower. Yeah, brain trust without authority. Cool. Does anybody want to speak to one idea out loud?
The brain trust one?
Any idea, anything that's caught you.
What I love about it is that it marries in some ways the best of both. Let's get the best thinking we have about this, but let the local, in our context, the local community, decide how they want to go. And that just is the power dynamics all over the place. All
right. So we thank you so much for these ideas and this conversation, your contributions. As it may or may not have been obvious, this was also an opportunity for Douglas and I to innovate, to experiment playing together and telling stories and, seeing if we can get Zoom and Mural to work and all of that. What you can expect next from us is we'll hang out if anybody has questions or things they wanted to dig on a little bit deeper. But we'll send the recording and all the resources that we shared today. You should get that in the email by early next week sometime. And then we're taking July off. So if there's something from our team at Lucid that you'd like to see, and we also have ways you can connect with us in here. Both Douglas and I have written books about how to do these things. Those are available, linked in the mural. We would love to connect with you and hear what you would like to hear more of when we come back in the fall. So thank you, everybody, for coming to play with us. And if you'd like to hang out and chat, you're very welcome to do so. But otherwise, enjoy your month. Enjoy your month.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you.
See everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.